Thank you so much. I think this will be a great continuation of the previous session on science and society relationships. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alberto Aparicio. I'm currently an assistant professor in the Department of Bioethics and Health Humanities at the University of Texas Medical Branch. And today I will be talking about the XPRIZE Healthspan competition. So Keith Comito mentioned a little bit about this competition, which I think it's a major event for the longevity community in recent years. But in a nutshell, the competition offers a $101 million in prizes to the winning teams that can demonstrate the restoration of function across three systems, which are cognitive, muscular, and immune systems. And basically, for us, it is a chance to build a community surrounding longevity efforts, trying to show that it is possible to actually slow down aging or rejuvenate the body, and put this in the map to sort of. So the talk for today, I will be giving you an overview of the ethical issues that are an ethical analysis of the XPRIZE Healthspan competition, and again taking in mind that considering that this is a very important opportunity for the field to engage the public, show that these efforts are feasible, and gain further support. It is a testbed for how these interventions can develop in the future. But many people may ask, okay, why is it needed to ask the ethical considerations of Healthspan? Is it different from any other competition? Basically, XPRIZE Healthspan is like a large clinical trial competitions. Multiple teams will develop their own clinical trials to show these improvements in function. But what is different in XPRIZE Healthspan is that this is testing how to show these improvements across these areas. Actually, the way in which these areas will be validated has been one of the innovations of the competition. For example, in the muscular field, participants will have to undergo functional tests such as a VO2 max, walking for 6 minutes, and the tests have been oriented towards function rather than specific biomarkers, but they will also include biomarkers. But in a nutshell, it is innovative how this will all take place. So to give you a bit of more detail about the competition is structured around two milestones. The first of which already took place, and teams from across the world presented the results to move to the next phase. And in this way, 40 teams were selected. Each team was given $250,000 to help them move to the next stage. And also 8 teams were selected for a different track of the competition, which focuses on FSHD, which is a muscular dystrophy with a genetic basis, which is also part of the competition. After the first milestone, participants will conduct small-scale clinical trials, and they will submit the results again for a second milestone, in which 10 teams will be given $1 million each, and then there will be a final phase in which the winning team will be chosen. The competition has attracted plenty of teams from across the world. There were over 1,000 submissions, and fully registered teams were about 232, which is a pretty substantial number. And you might look online at XPRIZE Healthspan website for a report which includes the 100 top qualified submissions. And again, out of this, 40 were selected. But today I'm going to give you an overview of some ethical considerations of the competition, and I think this resonates with the idea more broadly of how to get the message across from lifespan, and what sort of considerations to keep in mind of how to promote the field. So this analysis or this assessment is based on a clinical framework suggested by Ezekiel, Emanuel, and colleagues in 2000, and has been broadly recognized as a gold standard for ethical trials. I will not go into the details, but there's 7 pillars that are important to consider when undergoing clinical trials. One of them is value, and the first criteria is that clinical research should be both valuable for science and for society. And if you look across this consideration, you can say that XPRIZE Healthspan meet this criteria. You can say that the competition will allow testing the neuroscience hypothesis, or will gather momentum to validate these efforts to manipulate aging. And of course, if an intervention is determined to work, this will be leading to massive gains in healthspan and lifespan, and will be a huge gain for humanity. And in addition, the competition will also promote the generation of multiple databases and a centralized approach to analyze this data, which will be also very valuable for the community. Second, there's a question of scientific validity. And for the framework that I'm working on, a key consideration is whether the clinical research is well designed, whether it's robust, methodologically sound, does it have a clear objective, sensible trial design, and this type of considerations. So I think in this sense, the competition also meets these goals. Teams that participate must submit their own design of a clinical trial, which is evaluated by independent judges. But here comes into the picture one of the big issues that plague the field, or one of the ghosts, which is the issue of credibility in longevity interventions. So there's a significant preoccupation about snake oil being associated with longevity, or the possibility of some teams falsifying results, which is something to keep in mind. However, you can say that the structure of the competition itself sort of diminishes the likelihood of this happening. In a way, teams that are competing in the competition, they want to gain visibility, and they want to be propelled towards other efforts, such as commercializing their own startups or growing into a larger venture. So it is against their own interest to falsify data or conduct research that is not rigorous. A third consideration obeys to fair subject selection, and this is a key principle in bioethics, in which participants that will go into clinical trials must be selected both on the basis of not being vulnerable and not being privileged to participate in this study. XPRIZE Healthspan is a bit complex in this regard, because the teams do not have any guidelines about how to recruit patients, or do not have any requirements in terms of diversity. So you can say that the diversity of the different teams or the different clinical trials will be limited, but this is expected since the complexity of operating a competition across the world demands it, and also these will be small-scale clinical trials in the order of dozens of patients, so it will be very hard to have a very diverse cohort in each team. So for this criteria, I don't see any issue to notify. However, there's a broader issue regarding the question of subject selection, of who should participate in the study, and this obeys to the larger question for the longevity community of who is the demographic, or who is the patient that the longevity is catering to. There are discussions of whether the ideal participant or the ideal patient is a young person or an older person, and these are discussions that are still being defined. At least in XPRIZE Healthspan, the criteria for entry was expanded. Originally, it was conceived to be 65 to 80 years old, and it was expanded to be 50 to 80 years of age. And the competition organizers, they also clarified that they did not expect participants to be extremely healthy or in a very poor state of health. They wanted participants to be in the middle, so that it will be easier or more conducive to show gains in function, and it will be a better way to validate these results. Now, turning to the fourth principle, it has to do with the risk-benefit analysis and considerations. And basically, it obeys to the idea that the benefits of participating in the trial should be commensurate with the risks involved. As this is a longevity competition, there's a consideration that is different from other types of clinical trials that target particular conditions or diseases or interventions. It is the idea that longevity itself is not classified as a disease. So a person who enters a trial is not, by definition, trying to ameliorate the state of a particular condition. So in this sense, you can say that the risks involved should be lower than participants with more serious diseases or chronic diseases. And of course, this is a topic that I will be happy to address in the Q&A, and the extent to which the risks and benefits of longevity interventions are different from other types of medical approaches. But of course, it should not be underestimated the possibility of accidents or serious adverse events when running longevity trials. You have, for example, the case of Jesse Gelsinger, who passed away in 1999 during a gene therapy trial, and this created such backlash and controversy in the gene therapy field that set back the field many decades. Only until recently, gene therapy is seeing a resurgence, also moved by the advances in CRISPR and Cas and genome editing. A fifth consideration has to do with independent review and the idea that clinical trials should be run on an independent review board or an ethics committee, and this is a requirement that is met in most of the teams, as they have to outsource an IRB. Excuse me. The sixth principle and consideration has to do with informed consent, and this is something that we are all quite familiar with in the field of bioethics and clinical research. However, in longevity, there's a particular risk of offering participants false hope, or the idea that they might sign into a trial with unrealistic or overly optimistic expectations of what they can achieve. So it is important for participants to have a clear idea of what they can gain and what are the limitations of the study. And the seventh point that I would like to highlight in this analysis is the respect for potential unenrolled participants. And in this sense, XPRIZE Healthspan received some comments from the public having to do with the long-term risks of the interventions. Some members of the public question whether there will be a long-term follow-up, and this is of course a question that arises over and over in clinical research and has not been fully resolved. In many clinical trials, there is no long-term follow-up, or it is at least recommended. In this way, it should not be different for XPRIZE Healthspan competitors, but it is important to think about the long terms of these interventions, and in particularly the risk assessment that have been made and how much is known about particular interventions. And of course, another domain in which this matters is in aspects of data privacy and anonymity, which are also being considered in the competition. I will skip this for the interest of time. And just to summarize the overview that I'm presenting here, I don't see any major obstacles or any ethical issues with XPRIZE Healthspan, but it is an important opportunity for the community to deliver a consistent message to the public, validate different interventions around longevity. If you go to XPRIZE Healthspan website, you will see that the top 100 qualified teams offer a broad range of interventions, from small molecules to AI-based approaches to digital platforms. So it is a very interesting look on what is the state of the art. However, there are some considerations to keep in mind. as I was explaining before, there is the consideration of falsifying data, offering false hope to patients, incurring in accidents that may set back the field, and the long-term follow-up of participants. And I hope these are all considered in order to develop more robust and ethical clinical trial designs in both for the teams and for future clinical trials in longevity. Thank you so much for listening.